What's going on, everybody? So this probably won't be too long of a video, but it's still a very good one. Very good to know information, and something I run across quite often, unfortunately. So this customer complained that they have a certain area that is not cooling. So when I first walk up to the system, I want to figure out, okay, which area is having the problem. He said specifically fan coil 425. That's the area that's not cooling. So when I come up here, I can come and look at the central controller, find fan coil 425, and like I showed you in the last couple videos, you can go into that central controller, figure out what the address is of that 425. I'm not going to tell you right now. I don't want to spoil the fun. So right now you can see the system's in heating main, which means we're mostly heating with a little bit of cooling. So if we look, we don't have the outdoor unit diagram on this one, but if we looked at the outdoor unit, we would be in heating, so we'd be sending discharge gas inside to the branch controller and heating units, condensing that refrigerant, subcooling it twice, and then sending that liquid into the indoor units wanting cooling. We flash it, boil it, superheat it, and then that goes right back outside. So again, we have a unit that's not cooling. We're in heating main, which means mostly heating with a little bit of cooling. So if we scroll down to the indoor units, I'm just going to leave this here for a minute. You can pause it and see if you can find what's wrong. So if we look, we've got a unit that's supposedly cooling, but it's getting 119 degrees. Cool on 119. Okay, so that TH2 and TH3, in heating, TH3 is the inlet. In cooling, TH2 is the inlet. TH2 is right after the LEV, the electronic expansion valve, the TXV, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. Mitsubishi calls it an LEV. So TH2 is right after that LEV. TH3 is the outlet of the coil in cooling. We're sending it hot gas. Okay, how could we possibly be sending it hot gas when it's in cooling only? So again, I run into this problem a lot where this fan coil was assigned the wrong port. So all of these B numbers, B underscore no, all of these numbers are what port each unit says that it is on. So address 17, it's an 18,000 BTU unit. It's group number 17, and it's on port 4. So this one is on port 2. It's on the wrong port. So somebody assigned it the wrong port. We can have a physical, like we can pipe the suction line to one unit and then a liquid line to another. You can run into that. But in this case, somebody assigned it port 2 and it should probably be on port 5, say. How can you figure that out? Well, first of all, we've got a unit over here that's in heat and it's getting 54, 58. So we can start there. It might have just kicked on. That might not be our problem unit, but we'll have to see. So how can you check it without having to physically go on port 1 on the branch controller and trace out that port 1? And I got to tell you, if there's one port wrong, I'm just going to assume all of them are wrong. I'm going to test the whole floor, okay? Because if they made the mistake on one of them, well, I just lost all trust for them, and sorry, but you know, that's the way it is. For my sake, I'm going to go through and test each port and make sure it's connected to the port that it actually says it is. The hard part with these is you can have buildings that are running for 5+ years that never have this issue. And if you go and put everything in cooling only, well, it doesn't matter if the ports are crossed now, because even if this is on port 3, or just say it's on port 6, if these are crossed, well, I put this one in cooling and this one in cooling. So if this one is physically on port 2, well, I told port 2 to cool as well. So I'm not going to see any problems. The only time you see the problem of the port assignment issue is when you have a unit in heating and it's cooling, or a unit that's in cooling and it's getting heat. So what we can do, you have 2 ways to go about it. First, we'll put everything in cooling, even though it's, what is it outside today? TH7 at 45. I think it's even cooler than that. It's supposed to be 30. Yeah, it's probably around 30 degrees outside. So it's 30 degrees outside, and I put everything in test cooling. So we're going to go up to drive operation up here, and it's going to say, what do you want to manipulate? Indoor coil or BC? In this case, I want to manipulate the BC. So what we want to do is physically open port 4. Let's exit out of this real quick. We're in cooling only. If I open port 4 to heat and TH3 gets hot, I know that that port assignment is correct. If I open port 4 to say start sending hot gas and this one starts getting hot, well, I know that that's not correct. It's on the wrong port. Okay? If I told port 4 to open and this one gets hot, well, this one's the one on port 4, not this one. You can only tell when everything's in the same mode. You can go through and put, say, this one in heat instead of doing it the way I'm going to do it, but it's just going to waste your time because it takes 10-15 minutes to turn that unit into heat. Now it has to go from cooling only to cooling main. Everything about VRF takes forever. It's just a waste of time. Don't do it that way. Just trust me. Okay? So we're going to go up to drive operation again. We're going to manipulate the BC. Going to wait for that to open. So now on this screen we've got ports 1 through 16. Now notice how after 9 they changed to A, B, C, D, E, F, and 0. 0 is 16. I don't know why they didn't just put G. You could say, well, that looks like 6. Well, guess what B looks like? An 8. Ask me how I know. That's the most common port assignment issue that I've ever seen, is they mean to do 8 and they put B, or they meant to do B and they put 8. The reason they do that is because the dials are so small that they don't have room on there for 2-digit numbers. So be very careful when you're assigning ports or addresses that you do it correctly. So 10 is A, 11 is B, 12 is C, and so on. So we want to manipulate, let's just do port 4. We'll just start with the top. So we want to come over here. We want to tell A and C ports to close. And we want B to open. We'll hit that C to fix. And then we'll just hit transmit. Okay. So every single port has 3 solenoids. You can see here port 1, A and C were energized because A and C are for cooling. That's easy. SVB is for heating. Okay. Didn't look like it took that because we can see A and C are still, oh no, we did 4 actually, huh? So if we go back one slide, we can see port 4, A and C were open. I told those to close and B to open. And we go forward, A and C are now closed, B is open. Don't get in the habit of saying that, say on 21S4B, 1 means open, 0 means closed. because some valves are energized to close, some of them are energized to open. In the case of 21S4B, that's your four-way valve or your reversing valve. It's not open or closed, it's just energized. Okay, so don't get in the habit of saying, oh, it's closed. So, again, we just told port 4 to open up its hot gas and start sending hot gas to the unit on port 4. Depending on how far away that unit is, it could take quite a while. Well, in that case, it only took a minute. Perfect. Okay, so let me recap. Right now, we have A and C open. The unit is in cooling. We told port 4 to open hot gas and close cooling. Now we should see port 4 send hot gas to TH3. Go forward one more slide, and 93 degrees. I told port 4 to open. Port 4 sent hot gas to the unit that says it's on port 4. So we want to go back into drive operation, BC. You want to do it one at a time. So we're going to put this unit back in cooling and then go on to the next one. So port 4, we will de-energize SVB, energize A and C, and then we'll just hit transmit, and then change this fix back to C. I'm just OCD, I like to make sure that everything is back the way it should. That C, I believe, just resets it, puts it back into the unit's control instead of yours. So now we'll see this one close. So let's see what happens if we turn on SVB for address or port number 2. Go to drive operation again. Wait for that to open. So find port 2, de-energize A and C, open up B, hit fix, and transmit. Okay, I'm going to sit and wait for that to come back on, and we'll see what it does. I will check back in a minute. Alright, so it's been a few minutes. So again, I opened up port 2. This one is on port 2. I expect this TH3 to start climbing in temperature, but this one did. So I opened up port 2, and this one got hot. So it means that this address 20 is actually on port 2. I open port 2, the one on port 2 is supposed to get hot. That one did. So now I can make note that address 22 is on the wrong port, and address 20 should be on port 2, and go down there and adjust. Again, I'm going to go through and check every single one and make sure. Okay? Because if you have one on the wrong port, you have another one on the wrong port. Okay? So, again, with these weird issues, say you walk up to a building, you hook up, and the whole building's in cooling, it's middle of summer, or it's just hot that day, and everything looks great. Well, I'm going to start doing a port check and say, let me just verify that there are no port issues. Because if you have an intermittent issue where some corner office doesn't heat or doesn't cool, or seems to have a mind of its own, and then you get there and everything seems like it's running fine, well, I'm going to start asking those kind of questions. Maybe there's a port assignment issue. For the whole floor, just come in here and just put everything in the cooling, put everything in the same mode, and then just start manipulating each port and verify that everything's on the right port. Okay, then you can at least say, nope, everything's on the right port, something else is going on. Or you can say, well, yep, we have, I've had 5 or 6 units on wrong ports on a building that was years old. Don't think just because it's unlikely that it's not possible. So again, I'm going to go ahead and go do this through the entire unit, or all the indoor units. Make a note of it, and then I'll go down to this particular floor, shut everything off, change the ports to reflect what they're actually on, and then I'll have to do a relearn. So if I were to just go in here to the indoor unit and just change the port it's on, the unit doesn't care. I told it it's on port 2. It's not going to see that again until I tell it, hey, double check, ask again what port you're on. So from the very beginning, when you set this up, if I tell it port 2, it's not going to physically look at its port assignment or its address until I do a relearn or there's an extended power outage. So if you turn power off for like 4+ hours, when you turn it back on, the outdoor unit, the branch controller, the indoor units, everything's going to start looking at its dip switches, its address, and its port assignment again, saying, what is it? I forgot. Okay, but if you go in there and just start turning addresses and port assignments, it's not going to care. It's not going to look at that. So in that case, I'll go down here, change this port assignment, change this port assignment, and whatever else units I have to change. I'll come up to the outdoor unit, turn off the power on both outdoor units for 5 minutes. On the master, or the OC, you always know which one's the OC because it's the smaller address. On this one, I've got address 67, 68. 67's the master. Okay, so turn power off for 5 minutes. Turn on dip switch 5-2. Turn power on for 5 minutes. That's going to force the unit to go through and relearn its dip switches, its addresses, its port assignments, all of that. Okay. Leave it on for 5 minutes. Turn power off again for 5 minutes. Turn dip switch 5-2 off. Turn power back on. Hook back up. Do another port assignment. Check. Make sure everything is on the correct ports. I would just take a picture of this and make sure that when you turn it back on, that the ports you changed actually changed, and you should be good. The weirdest issue I've ever had was a building that was 3 or 4 years old. All of a sudden started throwing a 7102, which is capacity. It's saying say in this case we've got two 120,000 BTUs connected together. They can supply 240,000 BTUs. We can't ask these two units to supply 300,000 BTUs. It doesn't have that capacity. Okay? So in that case, the unit's going to say, hey, you just installed me wrong. You've got way too many indoor units, way too much capacity indoor units than what I can provide. I'm too small of an outdoor unit. Somebody screwed up. But on a building that was years and years old, well, that's very hard to believe. It's the right size unit. It was working fine when I was here doing maintenance 3 months ago. So, come to find out, the customer had a power outage for the most part of that day. When they restored power, what happened? Well, what did I just tell you? The system, when it's powered off for a long time, when you turn it back on, it looks at its dip switches, its addressing, everything. Somebody had accidentally flipped a dip switch that told the unit you're actually a 72,000 BTU unit, say, instead of a 120. So when that unit turned back on, it said, oh, according to my dip switches, I'm a 72,000 BTU unit. We're too small to provide cooling or heating for the amount of units that are connected to me. So I had to figure out which dip switches to change it back to, do another relearn, and system ran perfectly after that. So keep that in mind. That was a weird one. That's it for this one. Hopefully it helped. Refer back to this video if you ever need to do a port check. And that's it. See you on the next one.